Hello, I'm Holly Ittle. I'm the exhibitions director here at the Dairy Barn Art Center, and we are speaking to three artists featured in OH+5 Contemporary Art of Our Region, an exhibition that is here at the Dairy Barn Art Center now through March 13th, 2022, and you can find more information at dairybarn.org. The three artists we're talking to are Shelley Brenner Baird, Brian Hitselberger, and Suzan Morgan. Hi, Suzan. Could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm a textile artist. I live in central West Virginia in a small town called Buchanan. I've been dyeing and printing on fabric for maybe 25 years now. I don't know what else to say. What else would you like to know about me? Anything?
Well, that's good for now. We'll get more into the questions in a moment, I suppose. Hi, Shelley. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Shelley Brenner Baird. I live in Columbus, Ohio, and I have a random background, undergrad degree in printmaking, master's degree in photography. Then, like Suzan, I've been doing textile dyeing and working with textiles and surface design for maybe 20 years. Surprised we haven't met yet. And I also do a lot of sort of, I guess you could say, conceptual work using all kinds of random materials.
Great. And hi, Brian.
Hi, my name is Brian Hitzelberger. I am an artist based in Lafayette, Indiana. I have a background in painting and printmaking. And as an artist, I make paintings, works on paper, and I also make works kind of directly in spaces, kind of treating the wall like a canvas or a piece of paper.
Wonderful. Well, I think this is going to be a great conversation. I was really excited by this matchup that you've all signed up to talk to each other. So I'm going to turn off my camera and mute myself and let you all jump into this conversation.
Thanks, Holly.
Bye, Holly.
Thank you.
Okay. So here we are. So I guess we'll get started. I'll put the first question out there. Let's start with Suzan. What processes were used in making the artwork in the OH+5 Biennial?
Well, it involves, I'll kind of go in order. The first thing I do is I take the photographs that I'm going to use in my composition. I then dye the fabric, go with each component. My pieces are kind of like textile collages. I've heard them referred to that way. So after taking the photographs, I dye the fabric, and then I prepare my silk screens from my photographs, screen those images onto my dyed fabrics, and then collage them on to a base, usually quilt batting, to complete my composition.
Cool. Process intensive.
Yes, I wish I could do more quickly, but that's just not going to be the way it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Shelley, what about you for the piece in your you have the show?
This piece is kind of an oddball one for me. The first thing I did was research. So a lot of things were kind of bothering me lately. So I researched articles. Then I made this structure so that I could screen print onto color catchers. Like so. Color catchers are these things you put in the washer to ostensibly not make your colored clothes bleed on the non-colored clothes. And then I just cut them up into little strips and learned how to grommet onto a piece of felt. So probably a one-off. I don't see me grommeting much more.
Yeah, I'm actually hearing you guys talk about your process, and I'm realizing that I think we're all kind of process-driven people.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like so much of like the processes we're making are really embedded. I mean, like the work is kind of about the process in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
Or that's really kind of key to what we're doing. Suzan, I like what you said, where it's like, I wish I could do things differently, but this is just what I do, you know? And it sounds like you've arrived at a process that just really like, that this is how you work.
It is. And I remember one time, it must have been when I was in school at the Oregon College of Art and Craft, one of the professors talking about producing. If you want to get out there, you need to produce regularly and I think she implied that you need to produce a good size body of work.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, I'll produce a piece a week. This will be great. It's like a piece a month is basically what I can accomplish. I
Yeah.
finally say that's what it is. That's
Yeah.
what I.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really, I think that's interesting. You can't really deny your nature, you know, and I think that like the process of making art is a process by which you come to sort of know your own nature.
Okay.
I'll answer the question for myself. So for my piece, I took a set of, I think 25 pieces of paper and created collages on them that were sort of variations on the same image, kind of using Xeroxes of printouts of daguerreotypes, all of the moon. So kind of like several images removed, but also images of like eclipses and moons and kind of various stages of waxing or waning, and created a kind of suite of these images and allowed the Xerox texture to kind of function like a night sky, right? Like the kind of like grainy sort of thing that happens on the Xerox screen. But then I folded them into quarters and taped them up and addressed them and stamped them and put them through the mail. And very much wanted the process of going through the mail and the post to be kind of stamped on the surface of the image to kind of mark a distance travel.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
When you submitted this piece to OH+5, you obviously couldn't submit an image of your completed work. How did you handle the submission process?
Yeah, so I guess this is like, okay, so I made this for a show that I was in the summer of 2022. So it was earlier this year, and I mailed it from Indiana to the curator of this other exhibition.
Oh,
Yeah, which was in Athens, Georgia. And so it traveled from Indiana to Georgia, and then I drove there to install the show, opened all of them up, installed them, documented it. And then at the end of that show, I took them all down, brought them with me, and sent that documentation to the Dairy Barn. And they said, oh, and then when I was invited to be in the show, I thought to myself, well, do I mail it again? Like, do I kind of fold it up and mail it again? And I thought about that, but I feel like there were maybe going to be some technical issues with the post. So this time I actually just packed the whole thing in a box and shipped it that way. And so it's kind of traveled through the mail once, unprotected, and traveled through the mail a second time, like in a package.
okay, cool.
Yeah. So I didn't mail it. I mean, I both did and didn't. I mailed it to the Dairy Barn Center in a box. Yeah. But yeah, okay. So the next question, I think actually I am actually curious about this. What is the significance of the piece's titles? How do the titles come into effect? And maybe something that we could talk about is whether or not the process informs the title itself. And we can start with Susan again.
I don't usually give my pieces titles till I'm completed, although things do run through my head as I'm working.
Yeah.
This piece is titled Peace of Mind, PEACE.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty personal. I was raised in a military family. When I was a child, my father went to Vietnam for 2 tours.
Whoa.
And I was raised in a military family until I was in my teens. And I was, at the same time, even though I was a child, the peace movement was going on and the anti-war movement, and popular music, rock and roll, the music that I loved, the Beatles, were pretty much against war.
Right.
And I kind of felt when I became a teenager that I almost had a choice. Was I going to side with the military and my family, or was I going to go the way of peace thoughts, to put it briefly? And basically, I chose to go with the Hope for Peace. So that piece is about it. There's an image of a tank in there, and that represents my childhood. And then that's actually my face, staring up and looking at what the flower power, peace flowers. So that piece comes from.
Yeah. Yeah. Shelley, how about you?
Okay, my title is Fallen Idols. Part of it I'll be explaining when I explain the part of the series, but these are people, this all started happening in the news, like bit by bit by bit, like I say in my statement. And a lot of these people represented in this work were kind of idols. You know, they were people in power, like your teachers or your professors or your religious leaders or your movie stars or whatever. And they are just plain fallen. And so that just seemed the most logical thing. And I you know, have them hanging downward, so it sort of reinforces the sense of fallen. It is part of a series that I'm going to do, but I'll tell you that part next.
Sure. Yeah.
Pretty blatant, obvious title.
Yeah. Yeah. You didn't want the identity of the person?
Correct. I was really,
okay.
Yeah, because so I sort of give myself an assignment that's just bothering me. And then I sit there and go through all these different configurations of how I can present it, what materials to use, which way to do it. And I knew pretty quickly on, I really didn't want to, there was no point in indicting each individual person.
Right.
A lot of it's just obvious, you know, if you read about a Supreme Court justice, you know who that is. But I didn't use any names, and I just thought that the story behind it was the most important thing. Frankly, I could have done thousands of these for almost each category. I just, you know, I couldn't make it my life's work. It had to stop at some point. So I quit at 450. That was enough.
That seems like a good plan.
Sometimes the one would imply that there were like 300 from a category. So really, I did more than 450.
Yeah. Because you selected 450 from everything that you.
From everything.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, the ones that I could find interesting phrases that, you know, made sense to me, like a textbook case of everyone knew, or I wasn't till I was older till I knew it wasn't love, things like that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I'm surprised more girls didn't make claims against him, former manager says, you know, just on and on and on. So it's anonymous, but not really. And it just hope gets the point across a little bit.
Yeah.
And I could have added so many more since I finished. I'm like, not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's done. Yeah.
I'll answer my own question. I titled my piece Moon Pics because I wanted to be kind of uncharacteristically literal. You know, I think like when I make titles, I tend to kind of maybe come up with a phrase that rather than sort of explain what something is, I try to think about a title as sort of extending what something is. But you know, I was like, I think that there's so many metaphors already going on in this piece. I better just name it. And but then I started to think about the fact that one of my favorite albums is a record called Moon Pics by a musician named Cat Power, who I admire like a great deal. And it is an album that's the music itself is really filled with yearning. And I felt like the tone of that record in some ways for me matched the tone of the work. So I co-opted the title of another artist's album to title my piece, because there was some synergy both in the words themselves, Moon Pics, but also the tone. I felt like both pieces. All right, so we started to get into this. Was this piece created as a series, Suzan?
No.
Yeah, I think if you're one piece a month, you're not working in series.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
I kind of form one idea in my head at a time. I'm even the type of artist that I don't almost never have more than one piece on the table at a time. I get focused, I get my idea, get it formed in my head, and then that's what I work on. I don't put it aside and think about it till later, although I do take breaks as I'm going, and I'll take a break or two, and maybe I'll do something mindless like watch TV, or I'll be on a road trip and I'll be turning it over in my head that he's working on, and then I go back to it. And once it's done, I'm kind of, that's it. It's usually, that's the end of it, and I move on to the next idea.
Yeah. Do you always have the next idea ready to go when you finish the first one? I mean, is it I kind of like, oh my God, I'm done, so I can move on to this next thing?
Rarely do I start thinking about another idea or concept before I'm finished. Every once in a while I will, but I don't. I'm pretty focused on it. My concepts, a lot of my work is kind of more political, social commentary, and I'm a big public radio NPR listener, and I form lots of my ideas listening to the news and wondering about the world. So there's a wealth of things to think about for me. And it doesn't take long after I finish a piece to come up with the next idea. I've never suffered from creator's block.
Wow.
And I think public radio really helps. I'll have to let them know the next time I pledge. Anyway.
That's so funny. I think that there are so many artists out there who are turning basically NPR into art. Like truly. I mean, it's like almost like a direct translation. And like, I actually think that would really be like a fascinating show. You know, like it could be like grouped almost by story or like by program. Like, you know, these are all works of art that were made while people were listening to All Things Considered or Song Exploder or, you know, whatever. I'm big on, do you ever listen to The Daily by the New York Times?
No. Is that a podcast?
It's podcast. It's pretty good. I like this. They pick one news story and they just talk. That's the only one they talk about that day. They're usually between 20 and 30 minutes long. It's super produced. So, you know, there's a lot of editing, a lot of sound. It's not like a raw thing at all, if that's your thing. The host is really good. But like, I feel like that just becomes my news source. Like, you know, I kind of like, I only know what's going on with The Daily. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay, Shelley, how about you? Was this one?
It was going to be part of a series. I kind of wish that I could pick one thing and start on it and finish it. The last big project I did that has like 200 parts to it, I got the idea in 2005. And then I revisited in 2010. You know, so anyway, it takes me a long time.
Yeah.
So this was supposed to be part of a series called Falling. So I'll show you another. I took a picture of my kids way a long time ago. They're in their 30s now, standing on their heads. And so I made a screen. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I made a screen and I realized it looked like they were falling. And I thought, ooh, I could do this whole series using these different strips of different things falling. Like I have about 40 ideas. Like I have some fish that I have screened. So fish falling look really weird. They kind of look like bombs and they kind of look like fish. And of course they don't fall. And I have cats and dogs, you know, all that. But the fallen idols just was so pressing recently in the news that I just started with that one. So I assume I'm going to go back to this series, you know, and it'll be interesting because there'll be all kinds of intense ones and silly ones. And you know, so yeah, part of the series.
Yeah. And like, do you conceive of projects kind of in series, like in serial form? Sort of.
Yeah, like I did. Well, I did a big project called Best Served Cold, and I literally got an idea from an article, which I guess I'm jumping ahead to one of my questions. And started researching because I think I would have been a sociologist had I not been able to draw when I was little or something. And then things just sort of fester and bother me. And like you, I have this wall that I never thought about considering an art. I just pin stuff on the wall. And then, some of it surfaces like, whoa, I have to dig into this.
Right.
So that's just sort of how it happens slowly. And I eliminate different ways of, doing it. Like I could have done mug shots for these guys. And then I said, let's just do the words.
Yeah. That's interesting. On my end, this was the first, of course, the piece itself that has multiple components. So like my undergraduate was in printmaking, and I feel like a big part of my undergraduate education was like learning how to edition, right? And the department I was a part of, they were big on kind of students learning traditional skills. However, we were often encouraged to sort of use those skills in the service of kind of experimental or unusual ends. So it was familiar to me to kind of like use print techniques as a means of reproducing something, but in order to make something unique, so it's like a unique work made out of reproducible media, which I think, we all have used like kind of screen printing in our work before. This is like a familiar idea, but I also am somebody who's always sort of thinking about like, what's the right form for an idea. And the idea of mailing something or putting something through the mail kind of presented itself as a form for me, really because of the pandemic. And, the pandemic has, I think, illuminated the ways that we are biologically connected to one another. And that's where kind of social distancing and masking and things like that have become necessary. But I was thinking about the other ways of connecting, the other types of connections that exist between people. And the Postal Service is, of course, this massive machine that is in the background all the time, that is just constantly churning away, literally moving one thing from one location to another. And I wanted to kind of like collaborate with that machine. I wanted to kind of make that connection visible in some ways, but also like talk about the type of enforced separation that we had all been experiencing. And, once it occurred to me that I was like, well, I could just mail it. And, like mail art is, of course, like its own genre. Right. And I'm an educator. I'm somebody who's interested in art history. I'm not unfamiliar with characters like Ray Johnson or, kind of like all the sort of like big mail artists of the past. I'm familiar with with that history, but this kind of seemed like just appropriate for this type of work. And I have to say, as soon as I saw it on the other end, I was like, oh, I'm absolutely doing this again. It was, I think I went into it thinking it was going to be a one-off, but it just sort of, it showed, but also performed the type of intention that I had for it. And, there seemed to be a kind of like combination of like imagery and intention and process and aesthetic that, it sort of like hit all these sweet spots for me. So I immediately started to think about like other projects that could employ the mail. And so I see this as maybe like the beginning of a series of mailers, but now I'm starting to explore different imagery and different ideas for them.
Because nobody writes letters anymore.
Mm-mm.
And I sort of save too much stuff because, it might come in handy and I can maybe use it. So I did do a whole series where I fuse letters onto panels like in caustic. Like I have 52 of them done because I sort of like the idea that letters were kind of private and to you, but when they're stuck in wax,
yeah,
merge, and so people can't really read everything. But yeah, just the idea of letters and mail, getting real mail, and the mail is so exciting anyway.
Totally. I actually think that's one of the reasons why Amazon Prime has become so successful, not only for convenience, but it's just so thrilling to get mail.
And so quickly.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Okay. Last question on my end. Where do you find inspiration? Where do you find inspiration? And Suzan, you've already talked about this a little bit with public radio.
I have. I don't know that I have anything to add. Public radio.
Yeah, yeah. Are there other artists whose work who kind of like the way that they manipulate textiles or the way they kind of collage with textiles that you find, like, are you inspired by other artists' processes?
I'm inspired by other artists, but when I look at all the people I follow on Instagram, for example, the majority of them are not textile artists. But I think very interested in artists who juxtaposition desperate ideas or images together to create a separate meaning. And in my other, that comes up a lot. So yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Shelley, how about you? Where do you find inspiration?
Like weird newspaper articles, just phrases and headlines and things like that. And I do pin them on the wall. And my favorite artist that if I could trade portfolios with anybody would be Kiki Smith.
Oh my God.
I mean, she's like I completely bow down to her. I think she's amazing, and everything about her. I just think she's spectacular. And Robert Rauschenberg. I always liked that way back when I was in printmaking in college and photography and doing solvent transfers. Those are my two main folks. And Mark Bradford. Anyway, it could, never mind, my list is way too long.
It could go on and on and on. That's funny you mentioned Mark Bradford though, because I thought of him when I saw your piece, like all those little tags.
Oh, cool.
I was thinking about the end papers.
Yeah. Can I tell your Bradford story, a funny story? Well, first of all, this thing I did called Vow about violence against women, I totally was trying to channel him, but there was a huge Bradford show at the Wexner Center, and I went to see it like 5 or 6 times, and on the floor, there was this tiny little scrap of one of the end papers that he used in his artwork.
Oh, wow. So
I remember saying to my friend, ooh, I wonder if I like just stepped on it and it like would stick to my shoe and that I could take it home. And I will put it in a tiny frame. It would be my shrine.
Yeah.
He goes, no, you better leave it alone or we'll never be allowed in here again if you walk out of here with a piece of his work. So anyway. And I did do amendments, and I later on found out that I did amendments with vinyl yard signs, and I later on saw that he did amendments also, constitutional amendments. So.
Yeah. I have a friend who shall remain nameless, who is a big fan of the artist Tim Hawkinson. The kind of the sort of sculptor, he's kind of like this mad scientist sculptor who makes these really interesting projects. He's actually, I think, kind of like Suzan. I feel like every time he makes a thing, he's all in, right? He just kind of makes one work. It's sort of like he just kind of like has these crazy ideas for pieces and kind of finds a way to make it happen. Then he makes it, and then he moves on. And in some instances, the only thing that kind of makes one piece of his look like the other one is just the fact that it all starts from kind of what seems like an impossible idea. But he made this piece called Signature, which is just a machine that is attached to one of those old school desks with like the desk where it's like the chair attached to the desk and you sort of sit in and the desk is right there. And there's a mechanical arm kind of moving over it that holds the pencil, and another mechanical arm that would put a piece of paper on the desk, and the mechanical arm would move, and then the mechanical arm would drop the paper on the floor and grab another one. And the machine made a perfect replica of his signature. And so it's like this very kind of human feeling thing, this thing that actually you use to identify yourself as a person, but it's being like perfectly replicated by this machine. But when it was installed in a museum, it also makes this huge pile of signatures. Ooh. Like they're just sort of like kind of collecting in the room, and she clipped one.
Braver woman than I.
Yeah, which is like, I mean, how can you not, you know?
I know, how can you not?
Yeah. Where do I find inspiration? Well, it's fun. I guess, you know, it's funny. I just told that story about Tim Hawkinson, but I do think I find inspiration in the work of other artists. I teach. I find a lot of inspiration with my students, and I always kind of value the experience of kind of giving a class an assignment, and it can be very limited in its parameters and very kind of restricted in its materials, and yet, if there are 15 people in the class, I can be certain that there will be 15 entirely different approaches to this one prompt. And I find that sort of disparity of approach just to be really, really fascinating. And I really kind of enjoy sort of other perspectives. But as much as I look at and enjoy visual art, I think I really get inspiration from reading. And I read a lot. I read a lot of fiction and nonfiction, and I think that that's kind of where my ideas take root. And that's it. Those are my questions.
All right. I guess I am now the questioner. Suzan, what are you currently creating?
My piece that I'm creating right now, I'll picture, image, pine tree, middle section of pine tree, those little pine tree air fresheners that people hang in their car.
I like that.
So instead of pine cones, the tree is those little air fresheners.
Very good.
Cool.
Brian.
Tunnels.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I kind of have to wait another few days before I can get back to work.
Ow.
Oh no! What happened?
Carpal tunnel.
Oh yeah. Ugh.
Good surgery.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
That's good. Yeah. What am I creating right now? I am doing a show in New Orleans in May. That is an older piece of mine, alongside kind of like sort of newer artworks that are made in response to that. And also, I'm kind of curating like artist publications that are all made by like kind of like queer artists, and the way that they think about or work with their own imagery or their own work is kind of like, I have sort of like found kind of inspiration or influence in their work. And so it's kind of like half curatorial project. This is like a really cool small zine by the late artist Joe Brainerd, where he drew all of his to-do lists.
Oh.
So it's kind of like half curatorial project because I'm kind of bringing together all of these artist publications and zines. And then it's an older kind of wall installation of mine that has all different kinds of components in it. And then I myself am making new prints and new book work to accompany it. And that's what I'm doing. And I had to pause it all because I actually just moved into this new studio. And so I guess that's the other thing I've been doing is kind of renovating an old space and making it into a new workspace.
Nice.
Nice.
Oh, I have to answer the question, don't I? I have to give a talk for the Rife Center on March 16th. So they told me about it in November and I've been obsessing about it ever since. So I'm just, even though I've already done bits and pieces of it in other capacities, I'm working on that really hard. And March 17th, I'm going to celebrate and get back to work. But I may continue on this fallen thing. I've also been collecting lists for about 10 years. And I'm just trying to figure out how I'm going to work with the lists. Because I think it's interesting sociologically, what people buy, what they have to write down to do to get through a day. So I have a couple boxes of those. I just haven't figured out the structure yet. But I've worked with reality, like intense reality, for about 4 or 5 years now. I need a break. I just need some fantasy. I've had enough of reality. Okay, enough about me. Susan, what do you hope or think what do you think or hope is evoked in the viewer when they see your artwork?
Gosh, that doesn't feel like my goal when I'm making what I'm making. usually I feel like I'm getting something off my chest, like I'm exploring my own feelings, and it's coming out through my piece. One of the good points, despite that I didn't follow my professor's suggestion, is that because it takes me a long time to do a piece, I have a lot of time to mull it over, the thought that's going on in my head. I what I think are my truths bear examination, and I can see that maybe I think this, but gee, this opposite idea has some validity too.
Yeah.
So for me, I guess I kind of feel like I'm doing a little bit more for myself. And what I do like that has happened is when people who don't necessarily agree with my view approach me and we have a civil discourse on the subject matter. And that is so fulfilling. So that happens, I really, really love.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brian, what do you think?
Yeah. I feel a real kinship with what Susan just said. You know, I think there's that question that I think, you know, you kind of get put to when you're a student. I think I've even put it to my own students, which is like, you know, well, who is your audience? Or, you know, what is your audience? And I really think that, you know, kind of like the first audience person is always myself. You know, I mean, I feel like I'm making these things so that I can see what they look like when they are made, you know, and yeah, I think a lot about this idea about kind of putting something to bed that's in my mind by actually making it, you know, making work about it. And I don't know, I earlier when we were talking about inspiration, I just kind of said, oh yeah, I get it from reading. But, you know, I actually think sometimes I start a project by asking myself, you know, well, what is troubling me? You know, like what is kind of like sticking in my mind in some ways. And in order to make it, I can kind of like, I can be apart from it. But, you know, I do think about the fact that I think it's, if that was my only purpose, I would just make my work and never show it, right? I do put it out in the world. I do kind of like people to see it. And so I think what I often want people to do or to think, or the conversation I want them to have is, you know, what is the way that this material has been manipulated say about the thing that it's showing me? You know, I'm always curious to have somebody kind of contemplate, you know, why have these things been put together in this way? And how do they say something nonverbal about what is being depicted or shown? That I think is kind of a space that I want other people to kind of move into in some way.
Well, you guys both just completely answered my question. I might have to transcribe that and throw some of that in my my artist statement. Yeah, we're kindred spirits here. I completely agree. Wouldn't change it. Couldn't add a thing to that.
Well, and I think when you have three people who are so driven by process, I think it's no surprise that we kind of all sort of are of that mindset.
Very cool. Okay, what problems did you solve when creating this artwork? Susan, what problems did you solve?
I guess maybe it was a problem that I didn't know needs solving, which was kind of bringing into my head a review, a look back at myself and my history, and kind of fleshing it out. Okay, you know, what's a big picture of your life and what has happened in it? And I can see a reflection for me in that piece of a shift from military family, military environment, army bases, move, influences. Gee, I don't think that's the way that I see the world anymore. And so I felt that I was kind of painting a picture of myself in a way of my movement in
Yeah.
life. So I was solving the problem, but I guess if I was, it was being introspective and figuring that out.
Brian?
What problems did I solve? Well, I guess one of them is like the problem of shipping. I mean, it can be so expensive to mail artwork from one place to the next. And, you know, it's kind of like, oh, I actually can just put a stamp on it, you know, and actually put it through the mail, you know, the piece kind of comes true. Or sort of like the thing I wanted to do, it actually kind of does it. And, you know, I actually think that's kind of like a significant problem to be solved by a work of art is, you know, how to get it from point A to point B.
That's one reason I sort of was doing textiles, because you can roll them up and put them in it's easier to do that than if I were to actually mount them on giant panels. Some of them were 10 feet wide. So anyway, yeah, that's really interesting. And I know I didn't solve the social problems that I brought up in this artwork. All I did was my usual thing. I got something that's in my mind and I narrowed down how to do it and I did it. And that's, I don't think I solved any problems. I learned some new techniques like grommeting, which I'm kind of over.
Don't you think you kind of I mean, I know again, you know, that's always the thing about, like, you know, when you make socially engaged work is just sort of like, you know, on the other end of this process, you know, this work is not going to fix the problem, right?
Right.
You know,
Right.
it's like we work so hard in our studios, but it's like, you know, our work is, it's not going to feed the hungry, you know?
Exactly.
But one thing I do think that your piece does is that it kind of draws unlikely parallel between so many disparate parties in a way that, like, having the identities attached to these news stories, I think, is maybe something that it disallows.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good. What about that? Okay. If you have seen the exhibit, what is your impression of the show? Did anything stand out to you? Suzan?
What stood out to me were that it was so contemporary. I really enjoyed that. I liked seeing all the pieces that were statements on current situations that are facing us, like your piece. And I really liked that. That was the highlight for me, was seeing those pieces.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that. I would also just say that just the variety of approach to, you know, I mean, it was just the kind of richness and expression, and sort of there wasn't a dominance of one type of media over another.
Yeah, I agree. This show and the Rife Biennial, these are two of my just favorite shows, just the variety. And I like seeing all the work. There's a lot of work by students, like OU students and stuff. And I like seeing that. I remember those days. So it's very good. Are we ready for your quick fire questions?
Fire.
Quick fire.
I am ready. I'm gonna give you an or statement. You get to pick one, and within just a couple words, say why. Okay. Brian, clay or paint?
Paint, absolutely. Gotta have color.
Okay. Shelley?
Oh, paint. The third dimension's a total mystery to me. Gotta stick with the paint.
And for me, see, I don't know, paint. Even though I can't, I would failure at. Okay. Visit a gallery or visit a museum, Brian?
I think gallery. Museums can be kind of overwhelming sometimes. Sometimes just thinking about a museum, I can start to feel my throat get a little bit dry. You know what I mean?
Shelley?
Definitely gallery. Definitely gallery.
I'm gonna go museum. I love art history. I loved art history, and I love seeing museum curated shows of people long ago. I know Mr. Warhol wasn't all that long ago, but I did go to the Warhol a week ago, and I had to not cry, just had to stop myself. So anyway, okay. Morning studio time or morning hike? Brian.
Morning studio time. I feel like everything I've made for the last 10 years has been made before 11 a.m. Truly. I mean, that's just like when it happens.
Shelley?
Morning coffee, then studio time. Depending upon the weather, not lately.
Well, I'm with you both. I'm definitely morning. I'm up at by 5 every morning, and I'm ready to start immediately.
Dirty, but
My dishes first, but I'm definitely morning. Okay, Brian, sketching on paper or sketching digitally?
Sketching on paper, sketching on paper. Although I am coming round to the benefits of sketching digitally, I find myself going back and forth, but mostly paper.
yeah, I'm paper, if I even sketch.
Either. I don't sketch. I don't keep a sketchbook. I work all my ideas in my head, and then I start creating them right out from that.
Yeah, me too.
I'm very poor at drawing with a pencil, so I just don't. Okay, Brian, traditional materials or alternative materials?
I'll say alternative materials. You know, not to naysay traditional materials. I have a love for those too, but you know, I'm always interested. I think a new thing thrown in the mix can really liven things up.
Shelley?
Pretty much alternative materials, especially lately.
And I think I'm more traditional. Dye, paint, and fabric,
Mhm.
and embroidery. That's pretty much what I do. I used to be more alternative, but then I just kept paring back and getting to the bare bones of what I need to get my image out of my head. So
Yeah.
I'm more traditional. Okay, sun or moon, Brian?
Gosh, I wonder. I gotta go moon. I'm a true lunatic. I'm crazy for the moon.
Ooh, me too. Lunatic. Definitely moon. Better songs about the moon. The moon has names, like it's a snow moon. I mean, it was a full moon last night or on the
Think so.
16th, whenever that was. Was that last night? Yeah.
Mm.
Definitely moon.
I'm with you guys too. I'm moon, and I figure the reason I'm moon is the moon's not going to burn out. So that sounds
An
like a plus.
asteroid might hit it. You never know.
Yeah.
Okay, one more. Brian, music or podcast?
You know, I feel like it's hard to choose. It's hard to choose. I actually think if I'm really working, I can't listen to a podcast. I need kind of music. And I think I almost need music without words, without lyrics.
Shelley?
I'm definitely music, and I'm not very good at listening to lyrics anyway. So, music.
Yeah.
I think I'm split evenly, but a lot of times just silence. So
Oh wow.
Can't do
Okay.
silence. Can you do?
Yeah.
Anybody do Brian? Can you do silence? I can't do silence.
I don't start off that way, but I will look up and been like, oh my God, whatever I was listening to ended like an hour ago.
Oh,
and I
okay,
have-
that I get. Yeah.
you know, like I will sort of realize, you know, that I've been in silence for a long time. But
Then I get scared and have to turn something on.
yeah. But then I usually will. Yeah.
Very good. This was fun.
This was nice.
Yeah.
Hi, Holly.
Hi. I was smiling the whole time listening to you guys.
It was fun. I was surprised.
Like, Susan, what do you have coming down the pipe?
I am so excited. I have a piece that was accepted in Fiber Art International.
Good.
If you've ever heard, it's up at Contemporary Craft in Pittsburgh. It's a pretty prestigious international cutting edge show, and I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to have a solo show in Charleston, West Virginia.
Oh, cool.
That's coming up. And there's a conference, an Appalachian Studies conference that has invited me to be a demonstrator. So I'll demonstrate raw edge applique and collage, fabric collage techniques. So that's what's coming up for me. What's coming
Cool.
up for you guys?
Shelley, you've got your
I'm
talk.
still working on, oh, pardon?
You got your talk, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, much remind me. Yeah, I have my talk. It'll be on the Rife Center, it'll be on Ohio Arts Council, you know, whatever, YouTube or the Rife Center. Yeah, I've got my talk on the 16th, and then I did this big project that Holly showed at the back gallery at, I always say Chadwick, I always get the names wrong.
Chadwick Morrow
the Dairy
Gallery.
Barn, yeah, it's a 200, it's 200 pieces. And so basically managing that's been like a job. And then it went to Southern Ohio, no, then it went to Cleveland State University, incredible galleries there and wonderful people. Then it went to Southern Ohio Museum in Portsmouth.
Wow.
And now it's sitting in my closet for a few months, which is kind of a relief. And then it will be at Cultural Arts Center in Columbus in November with paintings by Anita Dawson. So that'll be good.
Cool.
And I might try and shop it around a tiny bit more, but it has to be within driving distance because I can't move 11 boxes. We can't move 11 boxes out of the car,
Yeah.
you know, overnight and then put them back in and keep driving. So that's pretty much, you know, I have some stuff in limbo, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I've got the
What's coming?
Yeah, so I got the show in New Orleans that I'm doing. And it like I have so much respect for curators. I mean, there's just like the level of organization. I feel like all I do is send emails, you know. I just feel like that's like a huge part of curating things, is just kind of communication and keeping that all straight. But I got this cool grant from the Indiana Arts Commission earlier this year. That's like for like creative entrepreneurs. And I proposed this project, which has been approved, to make it's a book, and it's actually all about something. Suzan, you can't relate to this at all. It's all about creative block, which you just said you don't have. And I have been interviewing all these artists. It's a state grant, so I've been kind of talking to other people in Indiana just about the times in their life when they were blocked or when they wanted their work to do one thing and it wasn't. And I'm transcribing the interviews, but sort of using them to write this essay, which will be the centerpiece for this for this book that's about this, but then the book itself will be an artwork as well. And it's been really fun because I still think of myself as new to the Midwest, and this has given me like a great opportunity to kind of reach out and meet people, you know. And so it's been a real pleasure. And I think artists are always happy to talk about their practice, you know. So I'm doing that, and then the show in New Orleans, and then this summer, I have some ideas for some kind of like a new approach to making paintings that I want to try. And I don't want to say anything else about it because I think the figuring out is going to be sort of like part of the pleasure. Yeah.
Cool.
I get that.
Well, that's awesome. I'm really excited for all of the stuff to see, to keep up with the three of you. And
we're busy. We got a lot going on. Yeah.
Totally. Well, congrats on all the things that you have coming down the pipe for all of you. Well, thank you, Shelley, Suzan, and Brian for joining us today. This was a really wonderful conversation. You can find more about Ohio+5 at dairybarn.org. The exhibition's on view now through March 13th at the Dairy Barn Arts Center in Athens, Ohio. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you.